Watching West Ham, you'll have noticed that the midfield hasn't looked particularly balanced. Paquetá, Soler, Souček, Alvarez, Rodriguez, Irving and even Lewis Orford have all gotten game time, yet neither Graham Potter or Julian Lopetegui have found the solution. So, Jack and Darcy have spent some time using Analytics United's tools to scour Europe's top 8 leagues along with their second divisions for the perfect midfielder for Graham Potter. And Darcy, you're going to go first because I believe the first man on your list is someone who there's been a lot of reports about.
Yes, exactly. And that's Ezekiel Banzuzi, currently playing in the Belgian Pro League for Leuven. He's 19 years old. And I think when you kind of see him on the pitch and see him start to run, the first thing you'll think physically is Amadou Onana now playing in Belgium again? Stands at just under 6'3", like super athletic runner, and that benefits him in possession but also out of possession. So we'll start with out of possession. Really strong in the duels, I think, considering his age, uses his body really well. He's ranked in the top 30% of Pro League midfielders for both dual types, so aerial and on the ground. So you're bringing in someone who can improve us in really what has been one of the bigger issues, which is kind of our players that are usually dual dominant. Someone like an Alvarez is not dominating the duels, but also he can, because he's athletic, he can cover space in midfield as well, helps us defend in transition, but also without sacrificing like the height and aerial dominance that Thomas Souček brings, for example. So he's a nice blend defensively, but is he reliable and useful in possession? I think from a technical ability perspective, I'm a fan, and I think he has the right fundamentals. Like he takes the ball on the turn cleanly, but only an 84.8 short pass completion rate in the Pro League. There is definitely some improvements to be made around reliability, because kind of I think imposing that on the Premier League, that might not be so successful. But there is an indication of, I guess, like a reliable passing range, because he's in the top 13% of Pro League midfielders for long passes. So there is some level of ability to pass in there. But the thing that really gets him on the list for me is carrying ability. I think it really speaks to how technically gifted he is. He's able to kind of break forward and progress play by opening up his legs, and I think even more so than passing, if you have a midfielder who can carry over space, that's invaluable, an indication of being really technically secure, and it's something he's in the top 7% of Belgian Pro League midfielders for. So you're bringing in someone who can dominate in the air the way a Thomas Souček does, win his duels like we're lacking, and then someone who I think has the technical fundamentals to not only improve on what we already have, but also develop into something really special as he matures as a player.
Yeah, nice. It'll be interesting to see if the links do end up being true and where that would take him. You know, someone who's quite young, it would be an injection of youth and mobility into the midfield that we don't really have right now. What about your first selection, Jack?
Well, very much looking for the same stuff, looking for mobility, looking for energy, looking for youthfulness, that enthusiasm and that ability to cover ground in the midfield. That's very much what our midfield needs, and we've really prioritised that in the players that we've looked at across this entire process. There are a couple of mid-tier options that we're going to come on to that maybe are a little bit different and more about price point and being able to get someone in who's at a good level that can contribute in midfield. But definitely in this slot where we're looking at younger players for the picks at 3, I've gone for Ngalael Macau from Lille, 20 years old. Offers a lot of the same stuff that Darcy was just talking about, really. And I think if we look at our midfield this season and Alvarez and Rodriguez being really struggling so much this season with recovering and covering in defensive transition, particularly in situations where they have to cover wide. So lots of situations this season familiar to loads of people where Alvarez and Rodriguez have been stuck at kind of, particularly under Lopetegui, sort of wide centre back in transition defending. Alvarez more so than Rodriguez probably. And then a winger just goes straight past them. You think back to that Chelsea game with Jackson against Alvarez, where Alvarez was actually in the middle of the back 3, and how difficult that was for him. So recovery defending, a big thing that I was looking at in all the players that we were looking across. And Macau, that's something that he can do. The speed that he covers ground incredibly well. So I think he would bring that to the team, more ability to cover the pitch and make us more successful at defending against counterattacks. The other thing that I think he does, there's a big important thing in our midfield, is he brings that height and physicality, but alongside a bit more security on the ball. So it's maybe an area that he wasn't quite so good last season. I remember watching him last season and thinking it's a little bit rough here. Some of the touches are not so good. Some of these passes are going astray. But this season he's gone up to 92% pass completion in Ligue 1. So massive improvement from where he was before. Which puts him in a good place to be able to contribute that kind of height that we get from Thomas Souček, that dual winning that we get from Thomas Souček, but a little bit more on the ball, a little bit more understanding of where to be on the pitch, in build up and being able to kind of take the ball under pressure and build up. And I think that's the next thing with him that makes him a really interesting option, is the tactical transferability from what he's doing under Bruno Genesio at the moment, the understanding of rotations, the ability to kind of take the ball deep and build up and then play the ball forward and then move forward into the space now when one of the 10s or wingers is dropping in to receive. I think that makes him a really interesting option as someone that can break forward, add energy going in both directions to the midfield, and basically just lots of running.
Yeah, someone I didn't really know anything about before we started looking into this video, and seeing clips of him at least, which is all I've really seen. He did look exciting from that perspective, if not from actually watching full matches yet. But what about your second one? Let's go with yours next.
Yeah, second is a player that I absolutely love. It's kind of a shame that he's not going to be number one, really. And I think the reason he isn't is he's probably a little bit older, not so much there for kind of that dynamism in the midfield in the same way that we talk about with a Macau and a Banzuzi. But Azul Matusiwa at Rennes, I just think is an incredible defensive midfielder, someone that has come through Ajax, went to Groningen, then on to Rams, and then on to Rennes, and just has continued to perform at a really high level across the last few seasons in Liga. I think with him, actually, it's that reliability that is the number one trait that he brings to a team. So 74% dribblers tackled this season. That's an incredible rate in midfield. 93% successful take-ons, and that's not from someone that's not trying to dribble. He does dribble. He dribbles very well out of pressure, actually. He's incredibly press resistant. So in terms of everything you want at kind of the base of your midfield, someone that wins the ball really well, keeps the ball really well under pressure, helps you build up, and then plays forward at a really good rate as well. I think I've watched him 5-6 times this season. He's always kind of come out as very close to man of the match every single time I've seen him play. Maybe not exactly the qualities that we're looking for in a midfielder that we would prioritize in the players that we want. But if you can get someone maybe for less than 20 million who can make a huge positive impact and bring a really good technical level, a tactical understanding, a good physical level into the midfield, and kind of help just upskill the whole department, I think Matusiwa definitely would bring that to us.
Nice. He's someone who I've heard you speak about a lot, be it on videos, be it just in general chatter. We've had quite a few conversations about him. Darcy, what about your second choice?
Yeah, so mine is Anton Stack, 26-year-old German central midfielder, sometimes central defender, actually, playing for Hoffenheim in the Bundesliga after, I guess, slowly working his way up the German football pyramid. He started as a youth prospect at Werder Bremen. There were periods at Wolfsburg too, also at Mainz, and then 23-24, he ends up at Hoffenheim. As a player and as a midfielder, I think Stack's biggest selling point is probably that he's physically imposing. He's 6'3", really strong, and an absolute dual dominator in the middle of the park. He's in the top 7% of midfielders for tackles in the middle third specifically. Also ranks really well for things like ball recoveries, and also just general tackle volume as well. But if we look at the attacking third, there's kind of a drop-off in terms of tackle volume. He drops all the way down to the 30th percentile. And that's because his game as a midfielder is very much more about kind of sitting in the area in front of the back line and being the midfielder that almost, I guess, acts as like an insurance policy by being really reliable in terms of winning his duels when the ball comes into that area. You know, like a team plays through the press, is trying to transition out quickly. If the ball's kind of bouncing around or loose in midfield, he's going to go and win it most of the time. And that's very clear when you look at his dueling data as well. 73.3% ground duel success rate, which is in the top 3% of Bundesliga midfielders, and then just under 60% for his aerials in the top 18%. And then I think on top of that as well, maybe the most impressive thing about him as an out of possession player is that he really well blends his defensive actions into like good positive in possession work. You know, like an interception can also be a pass in one action. And I really think when you're someone like West Ham, and obviously we want to keep the ball a little bit more, but with our squad right now, we do have such potent counter-attacking threat. That kind of ability, that ability to think quickly in that scenario can really set you off. And I think would be a really big upside as someone who's sitting deeper. considering his kind of wider in possession play, definitely technically sound. There's no issues with things like first touch, ability to take the ball on the half turn, but he really isn't a risk taker at all. His actions with the ball are quick, simple, often retention, circulation focused. There is some progression. I mean, enough volume to place him in the top 25% of Bundesliga midfielders. So he does progress. But when you watch him, you see that the progressive passes he's attempting are generally low risk. They're useful options rather than attempts to break a line, break two lines. I think he does possess that ability. He sometimes shows it in the final third, playing balls in behind, but rarely will he ever make that decision when he's deeper. The one big drawback, I think, is mobility. He doesn't necessarily cover ground. He's not terrible in any way, but he doesn't maybe cover ground like a Mathiasen, for example. He doesn't eat up ground in the same way, and would maybe need to be partnered with someone that eats up a little bit more ground. And because I think like he brings a lot of that physical side and defensive side with some good technical ability, he just about gets to my number 2 choice without making it to number 1.
I would have Stack a bit lower down, I think. And I think this is why we do the extended videos, right? And we're going to get to talk about it more over on Patreon. But I think, you know, in many ways, when we do this, we have to find nice comparison points. And I think Stack and Mathiasen were both fit in this area where you've got slightly older players that definitely would be at the right kind of price to come in and make a big impact at West Ham. But when you're looking for that kind of raw dynamism, that ability to carry, that ability to play that pass that progresses especially well for the team, neither of these guys quite have that. So this is kind of, you know, your mid-tier zone where the price point is absolutely right to make a big impact at a club like West Ham, but not absolutely right maybe to be transformational for West Ham and really make a huge difference for many years going forward. And I think the one thing I worry about with Stack more so than anything else is what Darcy referenced at the end there, is just can he turn his body really quickly and then break out into a sprint very quickly to cover ground, or does it take him a little bit of time to get up to that full speed, and therefore by the point that he's got up to full speed has a winger in the Premier League just gone before he can get there? And that would be my big concern.
But as you've just said, there is an extended edition over on our Patreon right now, patreon.com/Analytics United, where both Jack and Darcy will be going into more detail about all of the players that you're seeing in this video, plus a whole bunch of others, some wild cards, some honourable mentions, all of that kind of stuff. So if you're wondering who else is out there in Europe, maybe even not from a West Ham signing perspective, maybe you're just interested in interesting players across the continent, you can find a lot more of that at patreon.com/Analytics United. Link in the description below. Remember, the first 7 days is always free. But Jack, if Stack was going to be lower for you, then who's number 1?
Yeah, number 1 is a player that I'm really excited to get to talk about on AEU, player that I've really enjoyed watching for a couple of years now. I think with this player, there's probably a little bit more upside going forward, and some of the stuff that Darcy was talking about being able to sit deeper and screen the defence and be really dominant in the duels, maybe is less so kind of what you're looking at with this guy. But Lamine Camara at Monaco, 21-year-old Senegalese midfielder, is just exceptional at all the things that you want a number 8 to do. And I think the number 1 thing that I want to speak about with him, which is maybe not what other people would put first when speaking about Lamine Camara, is actually that one thing that I think our midfielders desperately lacked since Declan Rice left, which, I mean, it was always going to be a struggle to replace this, is that Rice was brilliant at not just closing lanes down and making it difficult for the opposition to progress through the centre of the pitch. He was actually really good at inviting dangerous passes. So he was very good at scanning, seeing someone that might be moving into space to receive, like the opposition number 10, and then standing out of the way purposefully to invite the pass from one of the opposition defenders or defensive midfielders. And then he would use his burst to break across the front of that player, win the ball in front of them, and then carry forward and create a transitional moment for the team. And Lamine Camara at Monaco is doing the exact same stuff in midfield. That kind of wait, see the option before the pass is played, step across, win the ball, and then carry off the back of that and create a counter attack. And again, when you think about the players that we have in the front line, when you think that Jared Bowen is going to be here for some time, Crescencio Somerville's going to be there, the players that you could release to in those moments to then generate really positive attacking situations, I think the options are amazing for Kamara, and the way that he could work in tandem with our other players is kind of a dream. I think he would be an amazing fit for all of those reasons. There are other things he does. He's a dead ball specialist at Monaco, whips those are really good balls in, corners, free kicks. So in terms of what we've lost with Ward-Prowse as well, and with Cresswell kind of taking a back seat in the squad and probably likely to leave at the end of the season, I think it's really important that we have a reliable, good set piece taker in the starting 11. And I think Kamara would definitely give us that. And then just to sort of sum him up across the board, this season in Ligue 1, top 20% carries, tackles, ball recoveries, blocks, key passes, assists, interceptions, progressive passes. Pretty much everything you want your midfielder to do in that area, Lamine Kamara is doing. Now, it wouldn't be cheap, and this is why he's number one. It would cost a lot of money to get him out of Monaco. But again, if you're looking at transformational ability, one player that completely changes the possibilities for West Ham in midfield, Lamine Kamara is definitely that.
Yeah, I mean, the two things, the Declan Rice tempts the pass then intercept it is something we've missed massively. I strongly agree with that. And also, we just need to figure out what's going on with our set pieces in general. And if we can get someone who's here for the long term who is also going to deal with that for us, that would be huge. Because it's such a thing that we're just lacking so much. It's easy, it's marginals, but they're really, really important. We saw under Moyes at his best how important they can be. But Darcy, your number one last, please.
Yeah. Well, I think Lamine Kamara is quite a difficult player to beat when you're looking for this type of player. But one guy that may have him is Florentino at Benfica. So 25 years old, CM/defensive midfielder, sometimes like lone six. And he's most definitely, I think, when you're looking for this type of like 6-8 hybrid, your top shelf premium option, as he excels at both like the in possession, but also defensive sides of the game. And I think really he kind of, to a certain extent, blends the profile of maybe someone like an Anton Stack with someone who has a little bit more in possession upside. So he's kind of like Tom Bischoff and Anton Stack for Hoffenheim rolled into one. Because he's got much of the physicality of a Stack, 6 foot tall, wins just under 60% of his aerials as well, but he covers ground much, much quicker. And it means in situations, for example, where his partner is the one tasked with the one going to support the press, and maybe Florentino ends up responsible for the two players that are, and they're kind of spread horizontally. It isn't alarm bell sort of time like it would be with some other players, because he's quick, but also forecasts play and anticipates well in the way Jack was describing about Lamine Kamara. And you often see these situations where he transitions off the man that he was marking, arrives at the free player just as they're sort of looking to turn, and it's almost like his lack of presence encouraged the pass so then he can go and win the ball. And something else that I think he is very Declan Rice-esque about him is the way he tackles, his tackle technique. He kind of tackles in a way which means the ball isn't loose afterwards. He kind of retains the ball and then can set the team on its way with just one touch after a defensive engagement. And that's the kind of thing you get from him throughout a game. So you can really rely on him as the midfielder sitting deeper, covering space in front of the defence, thanks to like ground coverage, but he can just as easily be the one jumping up to support. Some really impressive anticipatory instincts, ranked in the top 9% of midfielders in the Portuguese top flight for tackles made in the attacking third as well. So you've got someone that can do both the 6 and 8 sort of sides of the defensive role, can handle being overloaded, covers loads of ground, can make the jumps, and then in possession you have someone that's really reliable, really productive, and I think slick is probably the best word. There's just some really, really nice moments. I mean, obviously he plays for one of Portugal's more dominant teams, and you should expect to see things like lots of forward passing, lots of accurate passes, but that is exactly what you get. You get over 6 progressive passes per 90, over 88% overall pass completion, and then also impressive range as well, top 1% accuracy with regards to passes over 30 yards. And that kind of collection of data, the way it remains reliable across different pass types, different ranges, is very indicative of, I think, the central point of what I like about Florentino as an in-possession deep midfielder, and it's his decision-making profile. Firstly, what I like is he scans a lot, so he gives himself all the information to make a decision with, and then he also seems to be nicely in tune with like the level of risk that a certain pass selection or decision represents, and I think that's why you see such high completion rates across all distances. But when the opportunity to play a risky line breaker does present itself, he also has the ability to find it. And it's something we saw a few times against Barcelona in the Champions League during the week. Some really clean first-time progressions, or like progressions on the turn that kind of show his press resistance, really as a lone six. So I think with Florentino, you are getting one of the premium European midfielders who is just entering their prime years, covers ground, wins duels, lots of defensive actions, can handle unfavourable situations, and then is extremely uncomfortable on the ball. I think
comfortable.
Comfortable.
That would be great, wouldn't it? To sum him up, extremely uncomfortable on the ball.
He hates having the ball, actually. But I think if we can somehow make it happen, because again, big asterisks, I think a lot of people will be interested in this guy. He does solve basically everything for us in terms of a midfield profile. So if we can make it happen, great. But yeah, I just think he's such a good player.
Yeah, Charlie, if you'll indulge me, just speaking about that game of pure chaos midweek against Barcelona, there was one moment of just brilliant individual calmness and quality that came from Florentino, where they're 3-1 up just before half time. He shows for the ball from the goalkeeper. Rafinha comes, and anyone who's played against Rafinha, anyone who's watched Rafinha knows how much of a nightmare Rafinha is to deal with as a presser. He sees Rafinha coming, and he just rolls. Just easy as that. Yeah. Beautiful. Just slung round, knock the ball into the front line. No worries. Don't worry, everyone. This is easy for me.
It's easy. I'm glad you spoke, because originally what was going to happen is the link to the end there was going to be me talking about how uncomfortable I am on the ball. But now we can talk about how actually silky and smooth I am on the ball. And if you'd like to see more of that, you might at some point on patreon.com/analyticsunited.
Where are we going here?
Who knows? Patreon.com/analyticsunited is where you can find that, alongside the extended edition of this, where Jack and Darcy will go through not only all the players you've just heard about in more detail, but a lot more than that, in a conversation that will be over there exactly as this is up. If you're seeing this, it's there right now, link in the description below. But Jack, Darcy, good show, good work for both of you, and everyone subscribe, like the video. See you soon. Cheers, bye.